The grand chambers of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. 5,000 delegates from 300 spacefaring civilizations sat in stunned silence as they watched the holographic display floating in the center of the vast room. Many of them had never seen anything like it before. The footage showed the pride of the Zarkax Empire, their mighty Third Fleet, being torn apart by weapons that seemed almost primitive by galactic standards. Massive chunks of metal, accelerated to near-light speed by human railguns, ripped through the most advanced energy shields in known space as if they weren't even there. Ambassador Lin, the Zarkax representative, stood trembling with rage, his silvery scales reflecting the red emergency lights that flashed throughout the chamber. "This is an outrage," he shouted, his translator struggling to keep up with his angry clicks and whistles. These savages must be stopped. They've destroyed our most advanced warships with their primitive weapons." The other council members murmured among themselves. The Zarkax Empire had been one of the dominant powers in the galaxy for over 10,000 years. To see their ships destroyed so easily by Earth, a civilization that had achieved faster than light travel barely 50 years ago, was unthinkable. "We demand immediate sanctions against Earth," Ambassador Lin continued, his tail lashing back and forth. "These humans must learn their place in the galactic order." From her seat in the lower section, reserved for younger civilizations, Sarah Chen, Earth's representative, watched calmly. She was the only human in the room, and at this moment, every alien eye was fixed on her, some with fear, others with curiosity, and more than a few with newfound respect. The council leader, a tall, ethereal being from the ancient Nexus species, raised all four of their hands for silence. "We will now show the conclusion of this incident," they announced, their voice echoing through the chamber. The hologram shifted to show the aftermath. The debris of 30 Zarkax warships floated in space, their once mighty hulls torn to pieces. But what caught everyone's attention was the formation of human ships that emerged from behind Mars. They were small compared to standard galactic warships, but they moved with a precision that spoke of careful planning and intense training. "Observe," the council leader said, "how the human vessels do not pursue the remaining Zarkax ships as they retreat. They hold their position, defending their solar system, but do not press their advantage. This suggests their action was defensive, not aggressive." More murmurs filled the chamber. The humans had not just defeated the Zarkax, they had shown restraint. This was not the behavior of savages. Sarah Chen stood up, her simple blue uniform standing out among the elaborate robes and biosuits worn by other representatives. "Honorable Council," she said, her voice clear and steady, "Earth requests permission to present evidence explaining our actions." The council leader studied her for a long moment. In all their centuries of service, they had never seen a young species act with such calculated efficiency. The humans had not just fought back, they had completely changed the rules of space warfare in a single battle. "Permission granted," the council leader announced. "But be warned, Representative Chen, your explanation better be good. You have just destroyed a significant portion of one of our oldest members' military forces." Sarah Chen smiled slightly. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of expression that made several nearby delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Trust me," she said, retrieving a data crystal from her pocket. "You'll want to see this." Sarah Chen inserted the data crystal into the council's holographic system. The chamber's lights dimmed automatically as new images filled the air above them. The footage showed the peaceful human colonies on Mars and Europa, with their massive domed cities gleaming under the alien skies. 3 months ago, Sarah began, her voice steady but carrying an edge of controlled anger. These were home to 6 million human colonists. A hologram suddenly changed. The peaceful scenes were replaced by flashes of bright light as Zarkax warships appeared above both colonies. Without warning or declaration of war, they opened fire. The council chamber filled with gasps as they watched the domes shatter, exposing millions of humans to the deadly environments of Mars and Europa. Ambassador Lin stood up quickly. They refused to follow our trade regulations. A minor disciplinary action was. Silence. The council leader's voice boomed through the chamber. Their 4 eyes were fixed on the horrifying images. Let her continue. Sarah nodded and pressed on. The Zarkax Empire expected us to submit, like so many younger species before us. They thought destroying our colonies would force us to accept their unfair trade terms. She paused, looking directly at Ambassador Lin. They were wrong. The hologram shifted again, showing records of similar Zarkax attacks on other young civilizations over the past 1,000 years. Dozens of species had faced similar disciplinary actions. Most had either submitted to Zarkax demands or been pushed back into their home systems, their dreams of space exploration crushed. What the Zarkax didn't understand, Sarah continued, walking slowly around the chamber, was that humans don't react well to bullies. We spent the last 50 years studying every species in this council, learning your strengths and weaknesses. We knew the Zarkax would eventually target us. We just didn't expect them to kill 6 million innocent people to make a point. Several council members turned to glare at the Zarkax delegation. Ambassador Lin's scales had turned a pale gray, a sign of extreme distress in his species. But surely, a delegate from the Proxima Alliance spoke up. You must have known challenging the Zarkax would lead to war. They are thousands of years ahead of Earth technologically. Sarah smiled grimly. Are they? Or do they just have different technology? She pressed another button, and the hologram showed detailed scans of Zarkax shield systems. Their defenses are amazing against energy weapons. But you see, humans spent thousands of years killing each other with kinetic weapons before we reached space. Sometimes, the old ways work best. The chamber erupted in discussion. Many species had forgotten about physical projectiles, considering them primitive and obsolete. But Earth had perfected them, combining ancient warfare principles with modern technology in ways no one had considered. We tried to negotiate, Sarah said, her voice cutting through the noise. We sent 17 diplomatic messages after the attack. The Zarkax ignored everyone. They expected us to beg for mercy. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of various delegates. Instead, we showed them why humanity survived countless wars, disasters, and challenges to reach the stars. We showed them why you don't kill human civilians and expect no response. The council leader raised their hands for silence again. Representative Chen, are you suggesting this was a retaliatory strike? Not an unprovoked attack, as the Zarkax claimed. Honorable Council Leader, Sarah replied, her voice now cold as space itself. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm showing you proof, and we're just getting to the interesting part. The holographic display shifted again, this time showing Earth's military response in detail. Many council members leaned forward, eager to understand how a young species had managed to defeat one of the galaxy's most powerful forces. While the Zarkax spent millennia perfecting energy weapons and shields, Sarah explained, gesturing to the display, humanity took a different path. We looked at their technology and asked ourselves a simple question. What if we didn't try to match their strengths? The hologram showed a human battleship, smaller than its Zarkax counterparts, but bristling with what looked like primitive weapons to most aliens. Rails and tubes extended from its hull, nothing like the elegant energy projectors used by advanced civilizations. This is the UES Revenge, Sarah continued. Our first purpose-built warship designed to fight enemies with superior technology. Notice how there are no energy weapon ports, no standard shield generators. That's because we built it around one simple fact. You can't shield against what you're not expecting. The display showed the battle again, but this time in slow motion. Massive tungsten rods, accelerated to near light speed, simply passed through the Zarkax shields as if they weren't there. The alien delegates watched in fascination as what they considered primitive projectiles tore through the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Your shields, Sarah said, looking at Ambassador Lin, are designed to stop plasma, lasers, and other energy weapons. But kinetic weapons, simple pieces of metal moving really fast. Your civilization forgot about those thousands of years ago. You thought you were beyond such primitive weapons. An older delegate, a silicon-based being from the Crystalline Confederation, raised a crystal appendage. But surely your ships would be defenseless against our weapons without shields. Sarah smiled. Computer, show defensive systems. A hologram changed to display layers of rotating armor plates on the human ships. We call this ablative armor. When hit by energy weapons, the outer layers vaporize, dispersing the energy. Simple, effective, and completely different from what anyone else uses. We also added layers of radiation shielding, making nuclear weapons viable again. Shocked whispers filled the chamber at the mention of nuclear weapons. Most species considered them too dangerous and primitive to use in space combat. You see, Sarah continued, pacing the chamber, humans have been killing each other for thousands of years. We got really good at it. When we reached space, we didn't forget those lessons. We built upon them. While the Zarkax relied on their advanced technology, we combined old and new. Railguns with computer targeting, nuclear weapons with precision delivery systems, ancient warfare principles with modern space combat. The council leader spoke up, their voice thoughtful. You turned your technological disadvantage into an advantage. Most impressive. Sarah nodded. The Zarkax assumed their superior technology made them invincible. They forgot that sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. A rock thrown hard enough can crack the most expensive window. Ambassador Lin, who had been silent for some time, finally spoke. But this goes against all accepted forms of warfare. These weapons are barbaric. Barbaric. Sarah's voice turned sharp, like killing 6 million civilians without warning. No, Ambassador. We simply spoke to you in a language you had forgotten existed. And now that we have your attention, she turned back to the hologram controls. Let me show you what else humanity remembers about the art of war. The chamber grew quiet again as the display changed once more. What they saw next would change the galaxy's understanding of warfare forever. The new hologram filled the chamber with a complex web of light, showing hundreds of interconnected points and lines. It took the council members a moment to realize they were looking at a complete map of Zarkax trading routes, military bases, and political relationships. While you watched our ships, Sarah said, her voice carrying the hint of satisfaction, you missed our real victory. The battle in space. That was just the obvious part. She touched a control, and certain points on the map began to glow red. These are Zarkax trade centers, where, mysteriously, their competitors suddenly got better deals. These, more points lit up in blue, are military bases where supply shipments have been accidentally delayed. And these, yellow points appeared, are worlds where local governments suddenly discovered evidence of Zarkax corruption. Ambassador Lin jumped to his feet, his scales now a deep purple with rage. You dare to interfere with our internal affairs? No, Sarah replied calmly. We just made sure everyone knew what you were already doing. Truth can be a powerful weapon, Ambassador. The council leader leaned forward, all 4 eyes narrowed. How long have you been planning this, Representative Chen? From the day we joined the council. Sarah walked through the hologram, making it shimmer around her. While you saw primitive humans stumbling into galactic politics, we were watching, learning, making friends with species the Zarkax had bullied, building relationships with their rivals, creating a network that could survive even if Earth fell. She pressed another button, and the hologram showed dozens of small ships, too small to be warships, scattered throughout Zarkax space. We didn't just build weapons, we built intelligence networks. These automated probes have been collecting data for years. Every corrupt deal, every illegal action, every secret military project. We know about them all. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some delegates were shouting in outrage, others nodding in approval. A few were frantically checking their own communications devices, probably wondering what else humans might know about their own civilizations. You see, Sarah continued once the noise died down. Humans learned long ago that wars aren't won just by having better weapons. They're won by having better information, better allies, and better plans. The Zarkax thought they were fighting a simple border skirmish. They didn't realize they were facing an enemy who had spent years preparing for this exact moment. A delegate from a small trading federation stood up. Is this why our trade agreements with the Zarkax suddenly became more favorable last month? And why our mining colony dispute was unexpectedly resolved? Another called out. Sarah smiled. Amazing how reasonable the Zarkax became once they realized their position wasn't as strong as they thought. Their own allies started questioning them. Their trade partners started looking for alternatives, all because some primitive humans shared a few important truths at the right moments. Ambassador Lin slumped in his seat, finally understanding the full scope of what had happened. His mighty empire hadn't just lost a battle. They had been outmaneuvered on every level. So you see, Honorable Council, Sarah concluded, humanity didn't just develop new ways to fight. We remembered that the most important battles often happen without firing a single shot. The Zarkax taught us that might makes right in this galaxy. Her smile turned predatory. We simply proved we were mightier than they expected. The council chamber fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of a galaxy realizing that everything had changed. The tension in the council chamber suddenly broke when a small insect-like being buzzed up from the lower levels. The representative of the Kithki hive, a minor species that rarely spoke during council meetings, landed on the speaking platform. We stand with Earth, the Kithki announced, their translator turning their wing clicks into words. For 3 centuries, the Zarkax have been stealing resources from our outer colonies, always just enough to stay below the Council's notice. When we tried to complain, they threatened to declare our trade routes unsafe for travel. Before Ambassador Lin could respond, another delegate stood up. This one was from the Meridian Cluster, their bioluminescent skin pulsing with suppressed emotion. The Meridian Cluster also stands with Earth, they declared. The Zarkax have been forcing us to pay protection fees for decades. When we refused last year, 3 of our transport ships mysteriously vanished. Sarah Chen watched silently as more representatives began to rise. One by one, smaller species that had always kept quiet during council meetings started speaking up. Each had a story of Zarkax bullying, corruption, or threats. The humans, the Kithki continued, their wings humming with excitement. They helped us. 6 months ago, they provided evidence that helped us catch Zarkax ships in the act of raiding our mines. When we confronted them, they backed down. We didn't understand why at the time. Now we do. The council leader raised their hands for order as more delegates tried to speak at once. Representative Chen, they asked, how many species did you assist in this way? 47. Sarah replied calmly. All of them victims of Zarkax's unofficial policies. We simply gave them the tools to stand up for themselves. Ambassador Lin's scales had turned almost white. This is a conspiracy, a plot to undermine our legitimate authority. Legitimate? A new voice rang out. Everyone turned to see the representative of the Stellar Archive, one of the oldest species in the galaxy, rising from their seat, their ancient eyes fixed on the Zarkax delegation. We have watched your empire grow increasingly corrupt over the centuries, the archivist said, their voice carrying the weight of millennia. We said nothing because it was not our place to interfere. But these humans, they gestured toward Sarah. They showed us that sometimes silence only enables the oppressor. The chamber erupted again as centuries-old alliances began to crumble. Species that had always voted with the Zarkax were now openly questioning their relationships. Smaller civilizations were forming new bonds, encouraged by Earth's example. This is the real reason you attacked our colonies, isn't it? Sarah asked Ambassador Lin, her voice cutting through the chaos. Your spies finally realized what we were doing, but instead of changing your ways, You tried to bully us into submission, just like you've always done. The Kithki buzzed in agreement. They didn't expect humans to fight back. None of us ever did before. And now, the Meridian delegate added, their skin glowing brighter. We won't stay quiet anymore either. Sarah watched as more alliances formed before her eyes. Species that had never dared to challenge the Zarkax were now openly defying them. The galactic power structure that had stood for thousands of years was shifting in real time. The council leader observed it all with their ancient wisdom. They knew they were watching history unfold, the moment when humanity didn't just win a battle, but changed the very nature of galactic politics. And this was only the beginning. As the chamber settled into an uneasy calm, Sarah Chen activated one final hologram. This time, it showed the true cost of humanity's victory. The images were stark. Destroyed colonies on Mars and Europa, their shattered domes still leaking atmosphere into space. Earth ships, badly damaged but victorious. Lists of casualties scrolling endlessly through the air. 6 million dead in the initial Zarkax attack, Sarah said quietly. Another 30,000 lost in our counterstrike. Each number was a person, a family member, a friend. Her voice carried no anger now, only a deep sadness. The council chamber grew silent as the casualty lists continued to scroll. Even Ambassador Lin watched without speaking, his scales now a muted gray. We won, Sarah continued, but victory has a price. Those colonies took decades to build. The ships we lost carried crews who had trained together for years. We're not showing you this to make you feel sorry for us. We're showing you because everyone needs to understand what happens when diplomacy fails. The council leader nodded slowly. What would you have us do, Representative Chen? Change. Sarah's response was immediate. The galaxy needs better ways to handle disputes. The Zarkax aren't the only ones who abuse their power. They're just the ones who picked the wrong target. She gestured to the smaller species who had spoken up earlier. Every one of these civilizations tried to use proper channels to report abuse. Every one of them was ignored or silenced. That has to stop. A delegate from the Commerce Guild raised their appendage. Are you suggesting we reorganize the entire council structure? That's unprecedented. So is a young species defeating one of the oldest empires in space, Sarah countered. Sometimes unprecedented things need to happen for good reasons. The archivist from the Stellar Archive stood again. The human speaks wisdom. Our current system clearly failed to prevent this conflict. Perhaps it is time for reform. More delegates began nodding in agreement. The Kithki representative buzzed excitedly. We could establish new protocols for handling complaints from younger species and create better oversight of trade routes, added the Meridian delegate, their skin pulsing with bright ideas. Sarah watched as the council members began discussing real changes. The Zarkax delegation sat quietly, knowing their days of unchecked power were over. There's one more thing, Sarah said, her voice cutting through the discussion. She pulled up an image of Earth's remaining fleet. We won't disarm. We won't submit to restrictions on our military technology. But we will share our defensive innovations with any species who needs protection from bullies. The council leader's 4 eyes widened. You would give away your military advantages. No, Sarah smiled slightly. We're keeping plenty of secrets, but basic defenses, ways to protect colonies from arbitrary destruction. Yes, we'll share those. Because next time someone decides to attack an inferior species, they should have to think twice. Ambassador Lin finally found his voice. You can't just change everything. There are traditions, protocols. Traditions that protected the powerful and hurt the weak, Sarah interrupted. Those traditions just cost millions of lives. I think the galaxy is ready for some new ones. The council chamber erupted in discussion again, but this time it was different. Instead of fear and shock, there was hope. Species that had lived in fear of stronger powers were sitting straighter. Old alliances were crumbling, but new ones were forming. Humanity had done more than win a war. They had sparked a revolution. 1 month after the historic council session, Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of the newly established Galactic Defense Committee headquarters. The station orbited a neutral star, deliberately placed between Earth and Zarkak space. Below her, representatives from 30 different species worked together, implementing the reforms that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. Quite a change, isn't it? The archivist from the Stellar Archive glided up beside her. In all my centuries, I never expected to see the galaxy transform so quickly. Sarah watched as a human engineer worked alongside a Zarkak's technician, installing new defense systems. The sight would have been unthinkable before the war. Change was always possible, she replied. Someone just needed to prove it could happen. The station's main display showed real-time updates from across the galaxy, new trade agreements being signed, defense pacts forming between formerly powerless species, the Zarkak's empire, now under reformed leadership, working to make amends with worlds they had wronged. The younger species are calling it the human revolution, the archivist noted. Though I notice your people don't use that term. Sarah shook her head. We just did what anyone would do if they had the chance. The real revolution is happening right there. She pointed to the station's main hall, where representatives from dozens of species worked together as equals. A alert chimed, and both turned to watch a new ship arrive through the jump point. It was a Kith-Ki vessel, but it bore new markings, the shield and stars emblem of the Galactic Defense Committee. The ship's hull gleamed with recently installed human-designed armor plates. The first of many, Sarah said with satisfaction. Every world has the right to defend itself. The archivist's ancient eyes studied her. Some of the older powers are still worried, you know. They say humans are dangerous, unpredictable. Good. Sarah's smile was firm. Let them worry. It'll make them think twice before bullying another primitive species. Below them, the station's training center was filled with mixed crews learning to use both traditional and human-style weapons. The Zarkaks had started calling it hybrid warfare, a combination of old and new technologies that had changed military doctrine forever. Your colonies, the archivist began carefully. How goes the rebuilding? Slowly, Sarah admitted, but we're not alone anymore. 5 different species offered help with the reconstruction. Even some Zarkak's engineering teams volunteered. A group of young diplomats passed by, Meridian, Kith-Ki, human, and even a junior Zarkak's representative, all talking animatedly about new protection protocols for developing civilizations. You know what the most interesting thing is, Sarah said, watching them. Nobody's talking about superior or inferior species anymore. Turns out those labels don't mean much when everyone has something to contribute. The archivist made a sound that might have been a laugh. Indeed, though I suspect many species will think twice before underestimating humans again. They shouldn't just worry about humans, Sarah corrected. They should worry about anyone they've wronged. We just showed everyone that the impossible is possible. As if to emphasize her point, another alert sounded. A small fleet of ships appeared. A joint patrol of human, Kith-Ki, and Meridian vessels, working together to protect trade routes that had once been terrorized by pirates and bullies. The galaxy was changing. Old powers were learning humility. Young species were finding their voice. And in the middle of it all, humanity had found its place, not as conquerors or victims, but as catalysts for change. The stars looked different now. Brighter, perhaps, full of new possibilities. And somewhere out there, other young species were watching and learning an important lesson. The age of unchecked power was over. The future belonged to those who were willing to stand together.